Hello, we got snow this week in Seattle, and so it was a perfect week to meditate. Snow always makes me think about godly things. And so I actually pulled out my Bible today and I started to think about Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 to 23, the fruits of the Spirit. And I decided to combine them with this project. I hope you enjoy it. So I had taken the jar that used to be our Mica Flakes and I emptied it out and cleaned it up. I used undo to remove the label from the bottom. And once it was all cleaned up, I decided to alter it with my scraps based on my Bible study. Now, I'm going to tell you more about the Bible study shortly, but I want to get through the scrapbook stuff. So I'm using Beau Chateau paper, and I'm using a lot of scraps from it. And all I did was measure the height of the jar, not including the lid area. And I cut a strip from a 12 by 12 piece of paper, and that is a 12-inch long strip. So I tried not to do any measuring, and I put sticky tape on the back. Now, what was great about the sticky tape and the plastic is the sticky tape, for the first time, I've never seen this, was repositionable. So I could get that end to end lined up just the way I want it because I could pull it back easily. It was like the sticky tape didn't mind being pulled away, yet it was still very sticky. So then I checked and then I wanted to do the lid. And I did the same thing. I measured the lid height, took that 12-inch strip, and just started, well, first I sponged it. I meant to sponge the bottom too. I think I just forgot. But I think the sponging does make it look a little better. And so I just sponged it. Understand that while I'm doing this project, I'm not doing too much thinking. I'm just letting myself go at it. There was a box that Mercedes did that I loved, and that was in the back of my mind, but I wasn't trying to imitate it exactly. I just wanted to try and alter something round, so like she did. So in this case, I had no problem just attaching a piece of strip to the paper to the top and the bottom. I didn't do any measuring other than the height. And then I thought about adding some ribbon, but then I kind of liked the cleanness of the bottom and decided not to add any ribbon to it. I do wish I had inked it though. It has a natural inking on the bottom. So then I used my 2.5-inch circle punch and punched out the circle for the top, and I sponged it as well with the dauber. This was really easy to do. That circle was the perfect size for the top of the jar. And I use glossy accents, a very thin layer of it because you don't need much, to stick that to the top. Glossy accents, I think, and the Xyron were the only two things that weren't Stampin' Up. Then I used the label die and I wrote with my own handwriting Galatians 5, 22 to 23, the fruits of the Spirit. And then I attached that label to the top of the jar. Again, I'm going to talk more about this project and the spiritual nature of it in a minute. So then I pulled out some of our flowers. We have some silk flowers that I love, and they're in 3 different sizes. So I decided just to add a few of them. As you know, I like things fairly clean and simple, but it seemed that flowers would be a good thing for the top of this box, so I went ahead and added some. And I like the way it looked. I wanted to add some ribbon, so I found a thin piece of early espresso ribbon, and I decided to go ahead and add that. So I just put a thin layer of glue on it and then attached it in the same way that I attached the strips of paper. Again, I wasn't really measuring anything, just kind of bringing it around, being careful not to overlap the bottom so that it wouldn't unscrew when I got done. And it dried really quickly, so it wasn't like I had to wait a long time for it to dry. So then I put that aside, cleaned up a little bit, and started to focus on the inside. Now I have a whole bunch of staging pictures that I used with my 2.5-inch punch here again, and I cropped out these little children from these staging images. These images I use for scrapbook classes, and I thought they were a good idea to use since I was using scraps. These were things that I didn't have any plans for. I thought I could use them. But for a mom, I think you should use your own children or some other photography that you have. And I'll talk more about that later. Now I punched out approximately 9 of those circles out of the Beau Chateau paper as well. and I sponged them and ran them through the Xyron so they would be sticky on one side. But you could use snail adhesive or sticky tape there too. Then I pulled out this ribbon. So I'll put all the materials in the description, but I pulled out this ribbon. I love this ribbon. This is our vintage ribbon, and I'm using it as the binding for this little book, and it's a tiny book. And so my cutting mat is helping me judge where to put the circles, like to keep them all centered as you go along. So I'm keeping an eye on where the top line is and the bottom line on that grid so that they all are aligned properly. And my goal was to make sure that I had a designer series paper and then a photo, a designer series paper and then a photo, and then the back would be the opposite. So on the back of the photo would be a designer series paper, and on the back of a designer series paper would be a photo. And I would have to flip to make sure that as you go through the book, everybody is standing straight up. So I'm going to let you watch that, and you'll get it real quick while I tell you the real story behind this project, because it's really a Bible study project. So I had intended to study Galatians 5:22 to 23, which is the fruits of the Spirit. There are 9 of them. And I decided to allow myself to study each fruit and to define it biblically. So I used the cross references in my Bible to look up each fruit of the Spirit. And then, after I understood, I picked my favorite verse that I liked to represent each fruit of the Spirit. Then I wrote that all down. So that was basically the Bible study time. Next, I picked some photos. Now, I used the staging photos, but if you were doing this in real life, I suggest you think about your photography or your children's picture and try to align them to the fruits. I think that would kick it up a notch. So if you could say to yourself, what day did my child personify joy? Or what day did my husband show the greatest patience? And use those pictures to associate with the fruits. I think that would kick this project up another notch. Because what I'm going to end up doing after I get through putting all these pictures and designer series papers down is I'm going to actually handwrite the scriptures and the fruits that I've chosen right next to the pictures. And you're going to see that in a few minutes. So I'm just trying to get through it. I use the Xyron, I don't know if I mentioned that, for stickiness, but you could use any sticky adhesive that you would like to use to get the pictures on there. And what I love is that you do most of your cropping using the punch. And so it's a very easy project. Less than 40 minutes total for the craft piece of this. About an hour, hour and a half for the Bible piece, the Bible study piece, which I think is a really good ratio. So I'm just about done putting these down, and now I'm going to check to make sure it fits into the box well. If you have any problems, you can use your embossing buddy to remove any glue on the edges to make it not be sticky on the edges, which might happen. Now I go to my die cuts again, and I cut out 9 of those, the small die cut for the same labels die. And I had decided that I didn't want to use the stamping, but you could. So you can see that I did stamp first and change my mind. If you use the stamp, which is the smallest one with the little circle and the flower, then you'll want to use a 1-inch circle punch to punch out a blank white center, which will fit perfectly. Because in this project, we're going to do some handwriting, and I think it's really important. It adds such charm to your projects if you use your own handwriting. Even if you don't like your own handwriting, believe me, everybody will find it a little bit more charming. So after I get them all down, I just, kind of give them a second to dry, because this is a very fast drying glue. Now I'm going to pull out my favorite pen, which is the Parker Ingenuity that I gave myself for my birthday. And I'm going to write down each fruit of the Spirit, and underneath I'm going to write the favorite verse. I'll put in the description the favorite verses that I chose for each fruit of the Spirit in case you want to look them up or if you want to use them in your own project. But I suggest you actually take the challenge of the Bible study. Now, you can take this to other themes for those of you that may not be Christian or Bible readers. You can take this to so many different places. So use your imagination and create something unique. I really enjoyed this project. It combined my love for the Bible with my love for scrapbooking, and that was awesome. I wish you all happy stamping and Christian love.